What's up, metal and heavy music fans? Today we are ranking new metal bands. That's right, we're circling back to the very beginning. This was the first video that I ever did for the channel, and it's almost sadly still one of the most viewed ones, and I'm ready to just dive right in and redo it. So let's just get started with Cold, and these guys, I liked 13 Ways to Bleed on Stage, actually. Pretty decent album for the time. I don't know how well it holds up, but everything after that. I remember when that Stupid Girl song came out where they've got like Weezer on it. I was just like, I'm done, I'm out. So I'm gonna start this off by ranking one pretty low. I'm gonna put them at D tier. I'm also doing this a little bit in response and a little bit of spite too towards Finn McKenty of Punk Rock MBA, who was very nice to me. He came on and did one of my early podcasts when I had, I think, less than 1,000 subscribers, and he totally didn't need to do that. So yeah, nice guy, friend, but he's doing his own, and he had some hot takes that I definitely want to respond to. But anyways, let's go on to Stained. Break the Cycle is kind of a seminal new metal album, I feel like, and I actually think it holds up. I really enjoy that album, even though Stained, especially these days, like there's not so many good things to say. And really, even just after that album, with that like Gray album, I forget what it was called, everything after is pretty shit. So even though they've got one really solid album, I would still rank them pretty low. And also, are they influential? I will use some of his criteria for this. I guess I'll put them at D for now. Mushroomhead. I've never been a huge fan of them either and their style, but I know they have a huge fan base. I know that they're still, I guess, somewhat influential. I know people still back them to this day. They're still dropping albums too. Credit for that. There's some creativity there. Just me personally, though, I'm not a huge fan. I'm going to put them at C tier. Powerman 5000. I unironically love jamming When Worlds Collide, but this is another band that's just not that great. Their newer stuff is interesting too, by the way. If you haven't checked it out, it's very different from their old stuff, but I also need to put these guys at D tier. Chevelle, I have a lot of people arguing with me whether these guys even count as a new metal band, and that's fair. Like, I don't even know really fully how to describe their sound. I guess they're more almost like alternative rock with like a little bit of a Tool slant to the vocals and some of the sound. I really like Chevelle. I think that they're pretty consistent too. Another thing that I like to rank these bands on in terms of my criteria is their consistency of their discography. And as far as a lot of these bands go, there's not a lot of that, but with Chevelle, they actually have, like, I'd say a couple of really solid albums. Great even. Like Sci-Fi Crimes, I would consider even like an S tier album. I still enjoy listening to that. Their debut too is actually still pretty enjoyable for me. And even their lesser albums are like not bad. So I'm going to elevate these guys up. A or B, honestly. I'm going to put them at B for now, but I might even bump them up a little in comparison to some of these other groups. Papa Roach, this band is a tough one too because I'm not a big fan of them either. I, of course, had Infest. I had the CD. We were all jamming to Last Resort. I still know every word, of course. Finn, elevated them a little bit higher because they have a big fan base. They're still pretty popular, still dropping albums. I just don't like the butt rock direction that they went. So I kind of have to balance it out. Personally, I almost want to put them at D tier, but it doesn't really seem fair because they're still, relatively popular. I guess I'll just split the difference and put them at C tier. Deftones. Now here's a big response to Finn's list. He really dunked on mostly Deftones fans and really asked the question, why do people really love this band? And I think it comes down to are they the greatest band ever? No. Are Chino's vocals the greatest in the world? No. But I think it's just sort of in comparison to these other bands from this era, they're just different. They're unique. They don't really sound like anyone else. Their earlier albums do. There's definitely some comparisons to be made to Korn and things like that when it comes to even Around the Fur. But once they kind of progressed beyond White Pony, they moved into this sort of more post-metal area. They experimented more with electronic elements. So they they just do more, is really what it comes down to. And that's why I always put them at S tier. They're one of my favorite bands. Again, I get it in terms of people like mocking how the fans talk about this band. I'm not going to sit here and go on the actually tirade about like why they're like a seminal band to listen to. But as far as like why do people elevate them and why do I feel like they belong up there, look at their discography too. Like, listen to every album. They haven't put out really a bad album. I know I dunk on Gore all the time, but even that album is not like a D tier album. To me, it's just sort of like a C tier album, but everything else is like above a B, if not more. And, you know, from White Pony to Around the Fur, and then even later on with Koi no Yokan, just very impressive, very consistent, and that's why, to me, they're sort of the best of the best. And are they influential? I think that they really are. You look at Loathe, and clearly, and I even, you know, interviewed one of the vocalists from Loathe, and he said, yes, absolutely, Deftones is an influence, and they were actually excited when Chino like retweeted their album. All right, anyways, we have to move on. Finn also really dunked on Taproot in his video, which is totally fair. Like, I don't even necessarily disagree with a lot of his rankings. I just felt like he went in a little too harsh on some of them. Taproot, not a great band, not a ton of great albums, but I love Gift, like unironically, still enjoy that one. It's definitely of its time. I could see why people wouldn't even enjoy that album, but I guess objectively, I'd still put them pretty close to the bottom. But I'd still put them higher than these other bands in D tier. Soulfly, we need Soulfly on here. I actually really enjoy them, at least their first two albums, when they were just kind of starting to get big off of the split with Sepultura. And yeah, really, those two, great. I really love how they like brought in all those kind of tribal sounds and regional influences into it. It was another instance of like sounding different. And that's the cool thing about nu metal in general, is that some of these bands were really able to kind of like define a sound. Whereas like so many death metal bands sound exactly the same. So many black metal bands sound exactly the same. Every nu metal band kind of has its own sort of unique personality. There's of course again, when you get into the D and F tier level stuff, things get pretty bad and generic there. So just like any genre, there's good and bad. I'd say in this genre in particular, there's probably more bad than good. But Soulfly, anyways, I think that they deserve at least B tier because they're unique and pretty interesting to listen to. I'm not as big into listening to their later stuff, so they lose some points there in terms of consistency. But there you have it. Oh, another big point of contention. So System of a Down. I did not put these guys at S tier last time, but I'm going to elevate them now, especially re-listening to their discography for the System of a Down tier list that I did, which you can check out. Very consistent, like really good. And another one though that Finn just like was relentless on this one and even went so far as to say that they suck. And I respect your opinion, Finn, but I just think that you're wrong, because this is another case of, again, much more consistent discography than a lot of these other bands. I think they are very influential. There's a reason they have a big fan base. It's another issue too where like I get what you're saying about fans are going to go in and act like this is like the greatest thing in the world. It's high art, and it's not, but it's unique. Again, like their sound, their vocals, their kind of, again, those regional influences coming in on some of their melodies, the way that their songwriting kind of progressed. And I still love the self-titled album in terms of things that are just like really heavy, but also kind of like funny and tongue-in-cheek. And then also, of course, like Toxicity and moving into their later stuff. Really pretty solid too. Like solid performers. The drumming I always really enjoyed. Again, they're not the best band in the world. Absolutely not. But as far as nu metal goes, they definitely need to be at S tier. Oh, Cold Chamber. All right, so I have a little bit of a bias towards these guys because they were one of the earlier nu metal bands that I really got into, pretty hardcore. I have all of their original albums before the reunion, and that reunion album is not great. But and they don't hold up very well. Like, in fact, there's some pretty straight up cringe moments all over their earlier stuff. But there are some jams, like especially on Chamber Music. Like Tyler's song, like there's some really great songs that I still love having in my playlist, and Dark Days, Dark Days, Dark Days, like some great scream along moments that, yes, they're corny, but they're also fun. So I think I'm going to put these guys still, they're not great. They're not a good band. So I'm going to put them at C tier, but I'm going to put them pretty high. All right, Mudvayne is another kind of semi-tough one. I just did a tier list on all of their discography too, and so it's It's tough because it's so split. Like LD50 is another one of those like seminal top tier nu metal albums. It's just, you gotta listen to that one. It's fantastic. And then even the one after that, The End of All Things to Come, is decent. But after that, man, things went downhill really fast. I had some people disagreeing with me on that tier list. And if you love their later albums, that's fine as always. I'm not gonna begrudge you that, but it does bring down their overall ranking. LD50's so good though that I kind of want to put them at B tier for now. I might move them down to C tier because just consistency's sake, it's not great. So I may move some of these around. Limp Bizkit I put at A tier last time because they're like such a like Top Gun of the genre. Like you think nu metal and they're one of the first bands that you think of. Are they great? Are they a good band? No, but like from a marketing standpoint, from just a catchiness standpoint, like they're in the zeitgeist, and like Fred Durst just knows how he knows what he's doing. Like he's smarter, I think, than people give him credit for, and I credit him for that. And he's influential. Now, influential in a different way though? Like you don't hear a lot of bands trying to sound like Limp Bizkit, right? Although maybe that wave will come. That'll be interesting. So that's some of the reasons why I put them at A tier initially. But quality's sake, and in terms of like re-listenability, consistency, I'm not going to leave them up there. I'm going to bring them down a bit. I'm going to put them above Mudvayne though. Kitty, another one with inconsistency issues. I really love Brackish, like great song. That first album is fun, but definitely pretty inconsistent. It's more of a guilty pleasure almost. Oracle's got some solid moments too, and then they kind of lost me a little bit in the later stuff, but they've got a following as well. I'm going to put them at C tier. Head PE, fun, but also super cringe. Like one of the cringiest groups on here, and some lyrics that you wouldn't want to write today. Put it that way, which is fine. They were of their time. I'm not going to say like, let's go out and cancel Head PE. It's just, yeah, it's tough to listen to some of this stuff now. I'm going to put them at D tier. All right, Korn was another one that last time I put at A tier, not S tier. I'm going to elevate them up to S tier, obviously. Like they belong there. They're one of the first, highly influential. You're still hearing bands now doing this kind of style, and pretty well too. It's kind of cool. And not only that, but consistency wise, they've been pretty solid. Like not as consistent, I would say, as Deftones, which is why I still put Deftones higher. Because Korn's got some not so great albums, some even, dare I say, bad albums, but nothing's like terrible. And even the newest album as of this recording, The Nothing, really surprised me. Like it was pretty solid. So yeah, they have to be at the top. Linkin Park, I know a lot of people were mad at me last time that they're not S tier, but it comes down to partially I'm just not a big fan. I love Hybrid Theory. That's another seminal nu metal album that, if we're doing albums, needs to be at the top. But that's really the only one that I really enjoy. Meteor is fine. And then after that, yeah, there are certain singles I like. Like I love that like Burn It Down one. I listen to that one at the gym all the time. I don't think that's even the name of the song. But anyways, like that's a banger. Certified banger. But I won't put them as low. I think I put them pretty low last time. I'm going to put them at least at A tier because obviously huge fan base, pretty influential. Just seem like cool guys too. And they haven't put anything out that like I hated. It was just a lot of kind of just meh to me, but obviously other people feel differently. Non-Point, another one I have to put pretty low. Not really influential. Rabia is a fun song. I enjoy screaming along to that one, but everything else I'm kind of like whatever. Especially that I remember in college, like my friend was raving about their cover of In the Air in the Night, and I'm like, that is just the corniest, just terrible, just terrible cover of a great song. So D tier you go. Static X, another one people might argue are not really nu metal. They're kind of more industrial metal, but they sort of like, walk the line. There's a lot of nu metal elements in their sound and their look definitely too. Like they've got the drip, I would say, as Finn would put it. But yeah, they're solid. Wisconsin Death Trip is great. Machine is pretty solid. And then they had some kind of like dips in their mid-career that weren't so great. But then Cannibal was a really great comeback. And they had some other good ones after that. Rest in peace to Wayne Static. Definitely one-of-a-kind guy. I'm going to put them at A tier. I like them a lot better than Linkin Park too. POD, Welcome to Southtown, where the kids don't play. The most kind of like hip-hop oriented group on this list. They've got some got some tracks, I guess. They had their influence at the time. They're definitely, I would say they've dropped off the face of the earth at this point. I'm willing to bet that most kids today would recognize some of these names, but if you said POD, they'd probably be like, who? So I don't know. I'm going to put them at C tier. Sevendust had some solid tracks. I really liked the one, I'm forgetting the name of it now, with the kid with the apple on his face on the cover, but I went back and listened to that, and man, that album does not really hold up. The opening track is really good, and Angel's Son, or whatever the name of that track is pretty solid too. And they had some albums after that. They had a decent following, and their songwriting was probably better than some of these other ones. Better singer too. Lay John's got a pretty awesome voice. I'm going to put them at B tier. Slipknot. Now, everybody be mad that I don't put them at S tier. Maybe I probably should, but again, if I add that, because they're influential, huge fan base, like big time players in the new metal scene, the only thing that brings them down for me is that consistency issue. First two albums, fantastic. I still love Self-Titled. I still love Iowa to this day. Some of my favorite metal albums of all time. But if you ask me, they take a serious nosedive in quality after that. Again, nothing that's like terrible and offensive. I've gone back and re-listened to those albums. I'll do a tier list for Slipknot when the new one comes out. But yeah, just not particularly good. Not particularly good. So it kind of drags down their legacy for me. So I'll still put them at A tier. In fact, at the top of A tier. But I just think they just fall short of that S tier status for me personally. And you know what? I'm going to move up Chevelle after all. I really think that they deserve a spot at the table. Disturbed, another one, big fan base, were very popular at the time, but not as consistent as some of these other groups. I'm going to put them at B tier. They're definitely like, they're not the worst, but man, I don't think most of their material really holds up that well either. And then I always look for an excuse to shout out a newer, more kind of underground band, and so I added Tala on here because I gotta say, as far as like newer acts doing just straight up new metal, there's a lot of bands now kind of mixing like metalcore and new metal and things like that, but Tala's just a straight up new metal band, and they're really good. Like, they're really good. I get why some people like absolutely hate it because it's very chaotic, but Justin is an awesome vocalist. He brings a lot of energy and a lot of character to everything, does a lot of different styles, which I really appreciate. Again, in terms of new metal, like, you're going to find some of the most unique and instantly recognizable vocalists out there, as opposed to death metal, black metal, basically any other genre. And so I respect that he's bringing that back to the table with that. And then also their drummer is Mike Portnoy's son. So yeah, the guy who was in Dream Theater and just like legendary drummer, he's in this band and does a really good job too. Just across the board, really fun. Lots of Korn and Slipknot influences. I'm going to go ahead and already put them at A tier. They only have one album, so they have room to definitely slip from there, but from a starting point, it's very strong, and I'm just really impressed with these guys. But y'all, let me know down in the comments, how would you rank these bands differently or the same? And check out this playlist for many more metal tier lists. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.